Hello and welcome to Chapmanomics. Today we are looking at paper 3 and we are looking at how we can answer this paper in the best way to maximize the number of marks that we are doing. We're going to start with an overview of the Chapman system for how we go about answering our paper. Then we're going to look at how we do those essays that are all important for getting the most amount of marks. So remember to like and subscribe to make sure that you don't miss any of these videos when I post them, because you need the whole system in order to make this system work. I'd just like to caveat this though before we start with, if you already have a good system or if you have a teacher that has taught you a particular way of doing things, I don't want to override them. Instead, this is all for those students who are struggling maybe with their essays, they're not entirely sure how to put them together. Maybe you're just getting the same marks every time and you're not really improving. The idea of this is it's supposed to be here to help you. Okay, without further ado, let's head over to the whiteboard and let's go and take a look at this system. So my question for you is, what's the best order to answer your exam paper? It's probably not something that you've really ever thought about. It might even not be something that your teachers have particularly talked to you about. But actually, if we think about this particular question, we might actually be able to gain a few marks without actually doing anything that differently. Let me show you what I mean. If we look at how the paper is set out, well, paper 3 is set out as follows. We have section A and we have section B. Section A has 4 questions in it and section B has 4 questions in it, both 50 marks each. But here are the values for all of those marks. So our most highly marked question is our 25, then it's our 12, then it's our 8, and then it's our 5. If we go from the 5 first, rather than the 25 first, what we get after 3 questions is we get a total of 25 marks if we get every single mark. Now that is a fail. That's not passing the exam just yet. However, if we go back to front, starting with our 25 marker first, after 3 questions, we actually end up on 45 marks, and that is a D grade. Now for me, that makes the most sense to do. It makes sense to go back to front for each section. That way as well, when you're writing your 25 markers, you're the freshest you're going to be in that section. You have the most mental capacity and you have the most wrist capacity, but you also have the maximum amount of time left as well. So your wrist isn't sore, your mind isn't spent, you've got the most amount of time left. If I were you, and I'm looking at my exam paper, if I've got 12 minutes left or 10 minutes left in the exam, I'd much rather be faced with a 5 mark and an 8 mark question than a 25 mark question. So this system works going backwards, works not only for trying to maximize your marks, but also works for the actual exam proper and for if you're running a bit low on time. So my recommendation to you guys, you can follow it if you want, don't worry if not, but my recommendation to you guys is that you do your exam paper backwards. So for paper 3, that means start with either section A or section B, but probably start with section B and go backwards from your 25 marker through. Then go on to section A and do go backwards again from your 25 marker through to your 5 marker. And that way you should hopefully maximize the number of marks you're going to get. In order to do that though, we need to know how to write essays. So in order to really focus on those 25 markers, in order to focus on those 12 markers and 10 markers and so on, we need to know how we write essays. Now I have a system that I have developed that is hopefully going to help you to be writing essays in context. So what do we want from our essays? We want our essays to show good knowledge, to show good application, to show good analysis, and to show good evaluation. Those are our exam skills that we're looking for. And this system narrows down all the possible things you could talk about to ensure you're talking about an economics concept, to ensure you're using economics concepts that relate to the question and that are in context, to show that you are analysing and that you can explain the points that you're making. And then the system also ensures that you are evaluating your points too. Let's have a look at how it works. The first thing we do is we read the question and we note down any and all economics topics that could relate to the question. I think lots of students have a bit of a tendency to read the question and just start writing. That's not the best way to go about it. That way leads to minimizing your marks rather than maximizing them. You need to think about the question first. So I advise that you read the question and then on your exam paper below the question, you just jot down all possible economics topics that could relate to that question. The second thing you do is to then reread the question and make sure that all of your topics fit the question that you're being asked. If they don't, cross them out and discard them. We're not going to need them. After that, find a case study or the case study. So in your section A and section B, you're given lots of information. At that point, the point where you've got your economics topics, go to the case study, find it and see what fits the case study. If there are any economics topics that don't fit the case study, get rid of them. They're not going to be in context. They're not going to relate to the question specifically that you're being asked. We don't need them. After you've narrowed them down, you should be left with a series of topics that relate to the question and that are in context. At that point, we want to choose the two easiest points that we have left. We don't want to choose the points that are going to be the most complex to explain, that are going to be the most difficult to link together, because those points are probably not going to end up being that correct. And I'll show you what that means when we look at some actual questions. Instead, we want to focus on this idea of Occam's razor. Occam's razor is the simplest answer, is usually the right one, is usually the correct one. I think it's Greek, but maybe someone down in the comments can tell me whether or not it's Greek or Roman or wherever it comes from. I'd love to know. But essentially, it's a great rule for life that the simplest answer is usually the right one. And in our case, we want to find the two simplest points that we can talk about in order then that we can really talk about them in some depth and maximize our marks. After we've got our 2 points together, we're then on to number 5, which is we want to find 2 models that can explain our points and then that we can talk about in our analysis. And what we're going to do with those models is we're going to show a change, show an economic change. Whenever we're answering a particular question, there's always something that's going to be different after our economic action has taken place, after whatever is in the case study has happened. There's always going to be something that's going to be different, whether that's a shift in a curve, whether it's a movement along a curve, whether it's finding a Nash equilibrium in game theory. There's always going to be something that is changed, that is different. And that's what we want to show. So we're then going to find our models, draw them out and get them ready to write about. After that, we want to look at our models and look at our point that we're going to make and say, okay, this is the theory. We've got the theory down. We've got the theory in the context of the question. But in the real world, that's not quite how it works. The theory assumes ceteris paribus. It assumes that nothing else is changing. So what we can do in our evaluation is we can say, look, in the real world, some of this analysis might happen, but in the real world, there's going to be some other things that might counteract what we're saying. Some other things that might suggest that our analysis isn't quite correct, isn't quite true, isn't quite what's going to happen. After that, we've then got now our 2 points. We've got the models that we can draw and talk about in our analysis. We've got the points we're going to make for evaluation. So finally, we are then going to plan our essay or write our essay using the Chapman structure. Now, this is the structure that I've put together with sentence starters that is hopefully going to ensure that you don't miss out on any of those marks for those different essay structures that we need to put in place. So that knowledge, that application, that analysis, and that evaluation. And that's the system. It's a 7-point system, nice and easy to remember. We want to read the question, note down all the possible topics we could talk about, narrow down the topics by rereading the question, making sure all our topics fit the question neatly, then go to the case study or find a case study, think about a case study, and think about which points we could make that relate to that case study. Once we've done that, we find 2 models that are going to fit our 2 points that we can talk about in our analysis. Then we find our evaluation points and jot those down too, based on our point and our analysis. And then finally, we can get on to writing it using a nice essay structure. So in the subsequent videos in this playlist, I'm going to go through each of these points in some depth to show you exactly how these work and to hopefully maximize your marks. If you have any comments about this system, if you have any comments or questions, please post them down there in the comments and I'll do my best to get back to you. And I will see you in the next video where we're going to look at how we do these first 4 points of narrowing down our economics topics so that we've got our 2 essay points to talk about. So I'll see you in that video.